This is your host, Stephen Sargent, Around the Coin podcast. Today we spoke to Pawel Kuskowski. He was one of the founders of CoinFirm, which is one of the largest blockchain investigation companies. They just recently sold to LUCA. So he talks to us about the founder journey, being on the board, all what was happening during the sale, what it was like when the money hit that account, and his new project that he's building out with a core team of amazing compliance professionals, GateKnox. We talk a lot about the technology, what it was like 20 years ago, and how the technology and crypto and compliance has evolved, what he thinks about regulation in the decentralized protocol space, as well as DeFi. And we talk about personally, like the toll it took to build such a massive company to exit. So this is a great episode for founders, anyone interested in crypto, or anyone that has a payment or crypto company looking to get into the industry now. He has a one-stop shop in Gatenox on how to build out these traditional financial institutions and corporate entities and build a network around compliance. Hope you love it. This is your host, Stephen Sargent, Around the Coin podcast. We have a special guest today, Paweł, who's the CEO and founder of GateKnox, but he also built one of the competing blockchain investigation companies around the world. Paweł, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to go into some questions, dive deep down into you selling your company and what's going on with that.
Hi, Stephen. Pleasure to be here. I'm very curious about the topics that you're going to ask me, so very excited to be here. Listen, I mean, it's kind of unusual in terms of the setup for my history, my background, because I'm a compliance person by heart. And it's like, I never done anything else than compliance. It happened that I built company which was very good in compliance, but still I didn't step away from my core. So and on the way, many things happened. I grew up in Poland, studied in Italy, then moved to Ireland, where I started my compliance career back at the time when it was 2005, right? When compliance was completely different, right? I mean, AML, like it's nothing to compare. I think what it is like 20 years, 20 years, and we are in complete different space in terms of requirements, in terms of technology. I think technology was the biggest jump.
I want to interrupt you. Yeah. Talk to me back then. What was going on back then? Like, was it check fraud? Yeah. Like, what was really going on back then that you guys were worried about compared to today, where kind of technology is kind of taking over the forefront?
Yeah, I think a couple of things at that point was, I mean, anything was paper-based, right? So even if we onboarded, and part of my job was the fund registration in Ireland, I was at that time at Matthewson's Apprentice, the biggest law firm in Ireland, and big business for them was fund approval. And whenever we actually introduced any fund to the regulator in Ireland, we had to go through the AML scrutiny, right? And at that time, it was simply paperwork, right? So we got the papers, we collected, information provided by the client, and we sent this information to the regulator. That's it. This was the entire KYC, nothing else, right? And sometimes there's some funny stories, like we had very big fund, and which was about to start the fund. I mean, the US fund, which was one of the oldest one, which was opening new fund in Ireland, right? And I remember, like part of my job was preparation of documents, etc., right? And I received these documents in the like big envelope, right? And it was like for your eyes only, right? And it was like my boss said, like, we don't want to see this, right? You just take this, right? You review this and you send to the regulators. We don't want to see this. This is like kind of the AML approach, right? Back then. So since then, I think the technology is amazing, right? And that's a problem which we have on the market, that you have such amazing technology right now, but efficiency. I mean, I was just helping in one of the company to set up AML, the team, technology, putting these things together. And I tell you, thousands of clients can be serviced by a few people right now. And they make it completely effectively, with QA, with proper review, without the backlog, just simply applying the right technology. So I think this was a huge jump. I'm not sure about the overall picture, if that helped, because I think at the same time, like the criminals would be doing their job on like how you make this more complicated, right? Or how you bypass these systems. But at the same time, again, it's not, I think, AML it's a number game, compliance, it's a number game, right? So you manage to focus. I mean, if you build the system in the right way, you have effectively 99% of the clients being completely all right, 1% when you need to start digging, right? And this is how it's supposed to be done, in my mind, right? So you don't want to be focused on 100% and treat everyone as criminal until proved otherwise, right? Which is the approach many companies would have.
Right.
You want to reverse this, right? And you can do this in a number of ways. This is the back then and now comparison in terms of AML, right?
So you've been in there for 20 years, and you started, in crypto fairly early doing compliance and blockchain analytics. Do you notice, and I'm assuming you still have crypto focus or crypto native companies coming to you at GateKnox. Have you seen a shift between when companies are approaching you? I'm assuming at the start they'd approach you after they've launched the product, probably had some customers conducting transactions. Are they approaching you a lot sooner now, like before the product's going live?
Yeah, definitely. You're still going to have companies which kind of build and then first, which I believe it's all right until, and I think the regulators would chase you if you do a couple of transactions, right? But you need to do certain things to do this properly. So definitely the knowledge and how risk averse companies are right now versus historically. I think if you're dealing with the right companies, the right people, you will learn this, how they approach compliance. If you have guys who are, they know that they're going to be cutting corners, they know they're going to be, and they're going to, you get this feeling from the start, immediately. So I see if you want to deal, I mean, if you have someone who knows about compliance and they want to start this properly from the start, these guys are going to be successful and they're not going to be scammers, If you have someone who is like, let's do something, but it doesn't have to work perfectly, that this guy's not going to happen for them, or if it's going to happen, it's going to be, scam. That's my approach, right?
I love it. Now you start CoinFirm, which is a blockchain analytics company. You start this in 2016. When did you get into crypto?
Yeah. So this story is actually funny, right? I was chairman of the Polish Compliance Association, and we were running events, like annual events in Poland, when there were like 300 people coming in. You had the regulators, heads of compliance from major financial institutions in Poland, the Secret Service, Ministry of Finance, all these different people coming in. So this was annual, let's say, thing. And I was always wanted to keep this interesting for everyone. And then I heard about this new thing, which is called Bitcoin, at that time. It's like cross-border international way of paying for things, and it's internet native, right? So I invited these three guys, and you had the most, like the way you call it right now, degens, Bitcoin, these three guys. And I started this conference from this point, right? So everyone is ready. You have keynotes, and you have these three guys coming out there and saying, this fantastic technology. You can make international transactions. You can be anonymous, and it's going to happen. And it's going to crash banking, like all this stuff. And I was like, you can imagine the reaction, right?
Everyone's thinking, anonymous.
Yeah, but I tell you, the funniest part was I was sitting next to the guys who are like the compliance people from the most conservative financial institutions, right? And then at some point, the guys pull out on the screen, this is the app how you can buy Bitcoin, right? And this guy like, they pull out the phones, and I was looking like, what they're doing. They downloaded the app, they bought Bitcoin, and I think by far it was the best investment. Imagine 2013, hundreds of dollars in Bitcoin. It was huge. I think one of the guys bought the car. But I said, if these guys are actually able to jump into this, it means it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, they will need to have the framework how it's going to happen. So let's look what needs to be done. Primarily is the transaction analysis. I took part in some of the Visa data analysis. Visa allow access to the data and do some analytics on top. From a lot of data that you can take from transactions is very, very useful in terms of AML. Right? I was sitting with Paweł Alexander, and we said, this is opportunity. This is amazing. So we started digging in. It took us a couple of years, as you can imagine. And I think we still 2016 was early.
Like then, there wasn't many exchanges. I think, Mt. Gox, you probably had like maybe Bitstamp or a couple of other exchanges. What was like the main exchange where you were in Europe? What was like the go-to that everyone knew about back at that
Big
time?
stump, surprisingly.
Yeah.
There was a lot of European, like smaller one. We had a couple of good one in Poland. None of them exist anymore. So it was kind of European based. You have obviously the Coinbase and the US market and some shady businesses in Asia. And then we had opportunity to take part in the whole ICO crazy world, right? 2017, 2018. And we were first in the market with the Ethereum proposal, right? So this was the moment which I the most regret, that we didn't take full opportunity of that point of time, right? We were charging a lot, we were earning a lot, but we haven't been thinking in CoinFirm about, making this recurring revenue, right?
Yeah.
That's a magical word, recurring revenue. I know.
Hey, now that's
Yeah,
like
exactly. And I know
you
why.
saw the money coming in, but you didn't think like, hey, if we can get more of this on a regular basis, we're
It's
set.
like simple agreement, if we would have this idea before. Yeah, so there was like, it was my way to get into the crypto again through compliance, as you can see. One of the guy, Maciek, helped us building CoinFirm, so he was one of the founders out of the three guys. So there's also indication that he was like big time Bitcoiner, like big time.
So you start to, drum up this business. You have an understanding of the ecosystem, and you're like, hey, this is going to need guardrails. Like any good compliance person, even when this podcast started with Faisal Khan and others, the first thing they said is like, hey, we've been in the payment sector for 2 decades. Everyone's saying there's not going to be any regulations. Trust me, there's going to be regulations. There's going to be guardrails. So I think all good compliance people know. Same thing with AI. There's going to be guardrails at some point. Everyone says they're going to disrupt until they realize they need the traditional banking system to actually have a successful business. What were some of those early maybe mistakes or challenges that you had? How did you get those early sales? How did you sell that first customer on? Like, what was your go-to strategy? What was your competitive advantage? I'm curious about those early sales pitches.
Yeah, that's a good question actually. So our approach was that it's good to have your insurance policy in case you have any problems. Then you have the discussion around what you are doing has been regulated since the beginning, right? Because you could argue that many of the regulations, it was always around value transfer. Right. When you have value transfer, you have certain requirements and certain risks. So that was the explanation, but it wasn't easy sale, and that's something that during ICO time, right? People were kind of, they approach this in the right way, saying that, listen, we take from the market a couple of millions, right? And, why do we even risk anything? We can just pay these guys like 60, 100,000, and get this done and no problem, and there's like, money was flowing, like it was like incredible flow of money, So this was kind of the approach. We said like, we do this in Ethereum, the only one in Ethereum, so come to us. And one project was very interesting, right? Pillars out of Switzerland. The guys were doing fundraising for KYC project. At least they knew this is something important. They collected, I think, around 100 million, something around this amount. And they got stuck because they wanted to pay providers, they wanted to pay employees in real money, not the funny money, the real money, like the fiat, right? So they went out to the banks to ask, okay, can you open the bank account? And the guy said, how much money you have to deposit? Well, 100 million. And I said, all right, where did you get it from?
People.
The banks simply said, we cannot accept this. So they came to us and they asked us, can you help us to prove the source of the funds? And like we put some ridiculous amount, I tell you, we put some ridiculous amount in terms of how much we're going to pay for this, right? And they agreed. We did the work. We analyzed the whole transaction. Obviously, you rarely have in this type of transaction, especially historically, could find any, let's say, data which would be like straight, like criminal proceeds or anything like this. I think there's like 2% at risk. So we carve out these funds, they were returned, and the rest was clean. And we prepared this comprehensive report. They get this, they went to the bank, And the bank was okay with this, right? So that's kind of indication, this story was the win story for the clients, right? So this is how the intersection between the crypto and traditional was forcing them to be more compliant, right?
That's an interesting story. And I'm assuming the risk was low because it's an ICO. Most people are sending the funds probably from a known exchange, crypto exchange. It's probably not coming through their personal wallets. Or what did you see? Most of the exposure was to exchanges or, self-custody wallets.
Self-custody, actually, like at that
Interesting.
point of time, mostly was self-custody, even if, it's like funny because this market changed a lot, but at the same time didn't change, right? In terms of, you still have, I think, similar percentage, which would be self-custody. Maybe right now is shifting to the exchanges more because it's much more convenient, right? But at the same time, during the ICO, a lot of was simply funded from the self-custody wallets, right? And the
That's
risk
interesting
with
though. I would have never
exchanges.
thought. How about now? Like even maybe while you were still with CoinFirm,
Yeah.
did you see a lot of projects coming to you because they kind of needed you to be able to scan their blockchain or their token in order to get listed on the crypto exchange? Because I hear like that's a big thing. Like, hey, we'll pay whatever as long as we can get listed on Binance. We're golden, so we'll spend as much as we need to have a blockchain analytics company kind of give us that seal of approval. Did you see a lot of that at CoinFirm?
Yeah, but at the same time, the competitive landscape is increasing, right? I think it's even increasing right now. It used to be like Chain, Elliptic, TRM, CoinFirm, Merkle. Then right now, that many other popping up. So I think that's interesting time when you start raising question around the quality of the data, right? And that's something that it went down because the market didn't realize what you're using is critical, right? Where you get the data from is critical, because then you have, you can buy some data. You probably go to some dodgy providers and they give you all green, all perfect, and or you pre-agree on what's going to be high risk. So I think the market is competitive. There's kind of lack in compliance in general. It's like lack of understanding of what does it mean to be quality, right?
Yeah.
And I know that there was some movement. A couple of friends were actually indicating that we need to agree, create some industry standard on what's actually quality, which is, there's always a risk of becoming kind of closing that's us not and them.
Yeah.
Like it's like I saw this in other sectors and it's not good, or maybe it's good for the existing companies but it's not good for innovation. That's something.
Where's GateKnox now? Are you talking? Your organization focuses on compliance. The same conversations that you were having 11 years ago, like, hey, there's no regulations, kind of, but you're going to need to. Are you having those same conversations now?
Same conversation.
Decentralized exchanges and DeFi protocols are saying, hey, we're
Yeah.
outside of the purview of FATF and other regulations. And you're like, trust
Exactly.
me, you guys are going to be underneath the umbrella. Come in now. Let's build for the future. Look at the Coinbase compared to a lot of the other crypto exchanges we've seen that kind of waited until the last minute to worry about regulations. What are your thoughts now about DeFi, the NFT sector? Where are they going to fall under this?
I don't understand why they are so hesitant to embrace compliance, right? Because it doesn't have to be like, we're going to be perceived as we have to do this and we don't want to have to do this, right? But at the same time, I think it's like one of my friends said, crypto is like a high school. It's a really good top high school. You can learn a lot, you can earn a lot, but at the same time, this high school is free for scammers, killers, rapists, and nobody care. It's like, you don't want to go to this high school, right? Even if it is the best high school, right? And you don't want to go and have these risks. It's almost like, if you think about this in this way, and that, like, people ask me if I got ever scammed, and I said no, but it's a matter of time. It's probably going to happen to me. It's because it's they perfect the tools, the money is flowing, nobody is stopping this effectively. So that's something that I think we're reaching the stage when we need to choose, which way we want to go. And I think, without proper, let's say, setup, right? And applying to everyone on the market, right? I mean, it can be very low threshold, right? Like, I don't know, like if I got scammed, right? Or someone comes to me and said that these funds are, in question, communicate to the market, right? That these funds are in question, right? And let's make it as a process, right? Or if we see that this is something that reminds, a scam or rug pull or anything like this, right? That we should be looking at this very closely, right? As entire ecosystem, it's like it's not like like I accept this money, that's fine. Someone else, this Chainalysis, CoinFirm, who are looking after this. It's not my problem, right? I mean, if we keep thinking about it, it's almost like there's something that I want we launching as well. We call the sanction network, right? Where we want to create kind of constitution for crypto. And I know that it sounds really crazy, but at the same time, I think there's so many people who are long time in crypto who are tired of this market, right?
Right.
And they are technologists, very smart people. And they said, like, no, I want to drop this altogether because I hate this. It's like this connection of scammers, what's happening wrong in crypto. It's a beautiful technology. We can fix a lot of things. But at the same time, nobody seems to care about bad things happening.
And do you think that's led by greed? Do you think, because I didn't see any lawsuits in the NFT craze in 2021. When everyone's making money, everyone's a degen, everyone wants to be privacy, but they have no problem adding their name in real life to a class action lawsuit when the $5,000 token or ape that they bought goes down to $0. They're not blaming themselves. They're blaming you because all of a sudden you're not compliant now when they're not making money. I think some companies some protocols don't realize when the times are good, nobody's coming after you. But when things go bad, which is what we saw, everyone starts coming after whoever put the NFT on OpenSea.
Yes, I mean, I hope it's gonna change, but you're right. I'm not sure if it's gonna be like, who's gonna be driving the change? Let's put it in this way. I don't think regulators will be driving the change. I think it needs to happen at the industry level. But at the same time, we've been around the block for a long time, and we know how difficult it is to say that we need to change as in industry. We need to take the steps before it's almost like let's pump it. And so I have some hopes, and I think too many people are becoming tired that it's either gonna be gone or it's gonna be fixed.
I agree. Now, you raised, and I don't know how true these numbers are for CoinFirm, you raised about, I'd say, 18.5 million over 5 years. I don't know if that's close enough. That doesn't sound like a lot of capital to run a top blockchain investigations company. So I think a lot of founders and entrepreneurs are probably wondering, how did you stretch that? Like, how did you make that work? Especially in the time where, to get that high quality data and accuracy that you're talking about, you have to invest a lot in the technology and the engineers, parsing that and using that technology. How did you make that stretch for so long? Because we saw SPF blew that in one day by putting FTX's name on an arena.
Yeah, I think we focused on technology, and many European startups would have this, where in order to really become a champion, you need to go to the US, right? And the US is burning. You need to have like 10 million plus to go there properly. Without this, there's no reason you go there. And without actually this, you think about exit strategy, which is not the leader exit strategy, right? You cut on sales, you cut on go-to-market marketing strategy or expenditure, and you focus on technology and you focus on business. This is what we've done, right? And that's also why we got acquired, because we had really good data, right? And so that's something that this was kind of our winning formula to get the data. But it wasn't our strategy, like, to be completely honest, right? It wasn't our strategy. We had to survive with much smaller money.
What are your thoughts too, now that you kind of left that scene, when you see Chainalysis ringing, like I think they raised 100 million 2 times within 1 year. What are your thoughts when you see that happening? You're like, hey, what about us? Or were you like, hey, this is bringing more investment dollars into our industry as a whole. So maybe if they weren't around, we wouldn't have the investors looking at this the same way. Personally, how did you see when you saw that money coming around?
Yeah, I think we got used to the crazy numbers. Obviously, we're jealous. We wanted to have this type of investments. But at the same time, we knew that their valuation are really pumped, right? And I think keeping the valuation, it's tough. And we see this like with Carta, for example, right? I don't know if you saw Carta, they went down from 7.5 billion to 1 billion, right? In like 6 months. This is because of the pumped valuations. I don't think it's wrong in terms of pumping valuation. I don't think it's a comparison between Europe and the US. That's why, the European market is actually almost like the kindergarten for technology company, right? We, as quickly as you can exit from here, go to the US, right? Or at least, to Asia. Don't stay in Europe, right? That's unfortunately the case. So, yeah, we saw the rounds. We were jealous, but at the same time, we said, like, that's life, right? This is how we need to survive. And let's keep doing what we've been doing. We are growing like percent on annual basis, recurring revenue. So it wasn't bad growth. It was simply the discussion with VCs was like, oh, it's a winner takes it all. But it's not the case. There's no industry except maybe, but even in social media, especially when you have B2B, in B2B sector, you have like 5 communicators minimum. Who would expect that Telegram would be winning
Sure.
this race, right? It was like, when we had this conversation and we were saying like, oh, China is so big, you're gonna be probably second, third, so we only invest in the winner. So it's almost like I don't think VC are the smartest people in the world.
But they're betting, right? So when you're betting, you want the
Yeah.
shiny horse that looks like he's in the lead, right? Because that's the biggest payout if you win. They're not thinking long term. They're like, hey, get my money in, get my money out. I think there's sometimes an allure. You want to be saying like, hey, I invested in Chainalysis or I'm with these other VCs that are
Yeah.
I think people use that as almost like a status symbol. Looking back, do you think like, hey, maybe we should have took like $500,000 or $1 million and like dumped it into more marketing? Especially in Europe, we saw Bitstamp selling to Robinhood for what many people are saying pennies on the dollar because of the same thing. They never really advertised. They never really did anything outstanding, which is probably good when you're a crypto exchange. They were never in the headlines for anything bad either. But sometimes people like to be in the headlines, whether that's negative. What are your thoughts? Could you have done? Do you think now, looking back, like, hey, we should have poured on the marketing, bought out a couple conferences, etc., or are you happy with the way that you kind of evolved it?
Good question. I think the only difference is that to be in the US to fight for government contracts. That was the only way to make it grow, like at that point of time. Spending on marketing, I think wouldn't work, right? It's not the market when you would have the marketing spent. I think unless you are really in consumer segment, in consumer apps, like spending on marketing, it's a waste of money in many situations, right? Like,
and to your point, like those government contracts are huge, especially I'm assuming US is probably one of the biggest spenders when it comes to contracts, government contracts like that or defense things. For countries that you can't allow, like I'm sure North Korea probably spends a lot of money, but you can't really side with them. Tell me about your first couple hires. It's you, it's Grant, who's out and out there character. You're very, you're out there. You're not scared to share your thoughts. Talk about how that was like. Did you have to kind of tone it down a little bit when you're speaking to VCs, or how did you get people to buy into CoinFirm so early? You're still ahead of your time. And did you see a shift when Bitcoin kind of made CNBC in 2017? Did you see more people wanting to come work for your company at that time? Key hires.
Yeah, so we started with Paweł Alexander, right? That was the core. Then we got Maciek, who has Bitcoiner view. Then we brought in Grant, who was our US connection. He was fun in terms of marketing and many things he did extremely well, right? So Grant was a character, right? And then we were looking for, technology person, right? And I remember, we had this young guy coming to us and I said like, do you have any CV? And he said like, yeah, I can do something, right? And then I got the CV and I said like, the guy is fixing, water pumps or something like this, or heaters, right? And like no IT school, nothing right like this. But Maciek was saying like, I know the guy, he's like proper, right? So we met. Jakub was at that point of time 20 or 19, right? And we met, and I remember we were sitting in the garage. We actually started in the garage, so we were sitting in the garage, like very cheap place, right? And he said like, "Oh, you plan to do this and this, right? But you shouldn't be doing this and this. You should be doing this and this." And he's like, in 2 minutes, he just threw to the bin anything which was created before, and then he brought this, himself again, right? Turned out that he was, at that point of time, he had the biggest Bitcoin mining facility in Poland, right? In his father's backyard, right? He was extremely talented. Jakub was like, so we had a lot of characters, this type of characters, but we got very lucky in terms of key hires from the beginning, right?
What were your thoughts about your whole organization kind of resting on the technical ability of this 19, 20-year-old?
Yeah. I mean, you get this. I had my experience in terms of hiring people in the corporate world. At that point of time, I was like, 100 people reporting to me in Royal Bank of Scotland. So you start to understand when you meet smart person, right? And these guys are, like top smart person, right? It was simply, he didn't give a damn about his studies and all this stuff, and like we had really good team in terms of learning, understanding, and challenging each other, right? And we still are very good friends, and we still kind of have this, but we can sit down and like really without any like arguments, have argument without being angry. So it's almost like, and we had this open conversation all the time, and I think this was part of the winning formula. And I think this is winning formula right now in GateKnox as well. We want to maintain this like challenge me and, let be yourself to be challenged, so this is something constantly looking for, this type of approach and this type of people.
Is that challenging though? Because I see Carol Van Cleef as part of the team, our advisors. She's been in the same amount of years in the industry probably as you. Strong, smart personality. Is that tough when you have all A players? Like, who's going to make the final decision? Or you're kind of like, you're all used to this now after dealing with so many A players for such a long time?
I think you get used to, but at the same time, you cannot delegate decision making at the end, right? Decision making is with CEO. I think it's rarely you can delegate this, right? You can delegate the parts which that you can kind of allocate, right? Tech, data, but it's all running. But at the same time, if we need to take decision, like just to give you some idea, when we were working on like data engine, we had graph data engine we started, and we're looking for solutions available, right? So there's a couple of technologies, early technologies really starting, right? And so we had to make proper decision. The guys did the research, right? And it took like 3 to 6 months in terms of researching all different technologies, people available in the market, who we can hire, whether this makes sense or not. And at the end, that was my decision on the basis of their information and decision-making process, right? So this was, but this type of decisions were really collective, but at the same time, the final decision comes from you, right? And I think this is something that CEO must do, and that's the key role for CEO, right? Otherwise, the team needs to be running themselves.
I love it. So you sell CoinFirm to LUCA. They seem like they provide tons of analytics, reporting, insights. What was the process there that you can disclose? Did they reach out to you and say, hey, we need a blockchain analytics company. You guys are doing your thing, but if we bring you in here, we got the full set of suite of applications and things that our clients need. Or were you like, hey, I'm tired of this. I'm kind of moved on to GateKnox anyway. What was that process for you and the CoinFirm team that was still existing when you left as CEO?
Yeah, so listen, it was we reached the stage and there was a couple of decisions. If you ask me about wrong decisions, it's like, letting too many VCs on the board, and I think, the whole VC aspect in startups is unnecessarily toxic, right? I think, this is, money would have to come with some responsibility on every side, right? So it's like, we can talk about this, like in a second about VC. But, yes, VCs were really creating a lot of unnecessary tension for me, right? I think 2019, 2020, I was very close to heart attack. My family was really falling apart. I was like no shape at all, right? I was fat and really out of shape, which was never the case for me otherwise. I've had this feeling that, okay, this needs to kind of stop at some point. I did the close of the Series B with Six and Avalog. And then there was kind of tension in the board, and I said, I want to step down. And then there was new CEO, and the company was growing very fast. At some point, start running flat. So there was the thinking that we need to sell CoinFirm.
And was that during the pandemic when kind of everyone was like, hey, nobody's building, so nobody needs compliance if they can't even afford to build?
Right. But there was no space to grow. The company was, really up for sale, right? And then there's, LUCA, a little bit luckily, came to us and said, like, we interested, right? And for them, I mean, there are so many companies which would be obvious to buy, but it's very difficult unless you're living and breathing this industry. It's very difficult to assess which company you should buy or not. We were very surprised that CipherTrace was bought at that point of time.
Right.
But so we had LUCA coming to us, and it's like, okay, this is for us perfect match. It was perfect match, right? So I came back to the board to drive the transaction. And for them, it was data, very much data, and like security aspect of the data, right? We had the best coverage in terms of coins. We never sourced data from third party. We always had our own data.
Which we hear a lot about in this industry, right?
Exactly, but if you have like API calls to external provider on your critical, data, that's not good. Not good approach. So we had every node of the blockchains or coins that we covered. We had this on our own infrastructure, fully running. We never had the cloud infrastructure. We had actually our own infrastructure, which in terms of security and even in cost effectiveness, right, or accessibility of data was amazing, right? So this was kind of why it happened.
Was there any sticking points? They were like, it would be great, but like, was there any points that you thought like, hey, they say in order for a deal to happen, it must almost not happen 2 or 3 times. Did you kind of go through any points, and what were some of the sticking points where they're like, this could be a deal breaker, but you were able to maybe massage it out before the deal was done?
No, I tell you, I think the interesting part was when we had audit on data, and there was like very quick audit in terms of we understood that everything is proper, right? I mean, it wasn't quick because it took months, right? But it was done in the fastest way we could imagine. And, because we knew that like the way we created infrastructure with curated data, all this stuff, that's amazing, right? So I knew that if we can fail, it would be more into the personal aspects, but I think all parties wanted to deliver on this. So there was like price tag in terms of negotiations.
How do you audit data? You guys are you are the data. You have, I'm assuming some of your stuff is like closed end, black box. That's the whole thing about blockchain investigations and analytics. Who's going to go audit your data other than maybe another blockchain analytics company?
I think we try to be maximally transparent in terms of how we set up our algorithms. Like everything was written, everything was on paper, the whole infrastructure. The data sets, we typically had 2 sources of data for every data point, like everything scraped, all them. We had 1 petabyte of data. So that's properly structured. So you start looking and you see if the data does what it's supposed to be doing, right? Or if the engine do what it's supposed to be doing, right? So that's how you measure this effectiveness. And if everything goes in line with what's described, yeah, I think that's the easiest way to explain it. Obviously, it took very smart people to review this, so it's completely outside my remit, but this is how I would approach it. Yeah.
Are you worried during that time that they could be like, hey, now they know kind of how we do this, they could like essentially take that information and start up your own? Or is there such a high level of excellence that has to go into recreating what you've done?
It's cheaper buy.
It's cheaper to buy. So now take it to the day. You open up your bank account, the money hits from the sale, and I don't know where you are personally. Do you feel like, man, I will never do this again? The money's good, but like I've almost killed myself to get to this point? Or is it kind of like, hey, man, for all the hours I've actually worked, sleepless nights, the sacrifices, this seems like I got paid minimum wage over the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm just finally getting the payment now. What are your thoughts when that money hits the account?
It feels good, but at the same time, I don't think none of the founders would do this for money. I think money is important. That's kind of your measurement. But at the same time, it's fun. I think it's fun. That's the most critical element in startup. Building something, especially when you make it in the right way and it's achieving success, it's fun. You meet incredible people. You would never get into the store, meet these people otherwise. It's a modern way of venturing, I think. Like Columbus was discovering America. That's a new way. You have to have the courage, right? You have to be able to risk everything. Sometimes it's even physical. When I went to Lagos, that was kind of my weird trip.
Uh, can you tell me about like now, you were worn down, you almost harmed your relationships, your physical body, but now your kids are like, I want to do what daddy did. I want to build a business and make millions or hundreds of thousands or billions of dollars. I'm going to do exactly what you did. Would your advice be like, hey, maybe you should approach it? I could have done this differently. Here's what I would have done differently. Like, how do you approach that? Your kids seeing what you've done, but they're also seeing the reward and the risk. What advice do you give them if they want to follow in your footsteps?
Do it. Don't think about it too much. You need to do it. The only thing which is like crazy for me is I'm trying not to do too many things or not to think about new business because I'm trying to realize them. This is something I try to do. So that's kind of the builder in your mind. When you start doing something, it's like, and if you are successful, you probably try to repeat it, right? I would love to go to retirement, right? But there's no way I can actually think about me going, what should I play golf?
Your brain doesn't work. You can't. Your brain doesn't work like that, right? It's a blessing and the curse. The blessing is your brain work. Many people are like, I wish my brain worked like that, but the only caveat is it never turns off, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the risk is that you don't. I mean, you can be in the situation when you constantly doing this, right? And I think at some point you need to stop risking your money, right? That's something that, it's really because in CoinFirm, we put everything, right, on this. Like, I didn't have any savings. I mortgaged my house, everything, right? So that was kind of crazy approach.
How about now you start GateKnox? It seems like this is a more easier lift. Compliance is what you know. Technology you're really good at. It seems like just making these pieces into something that kind of solves probably the same problems that you were seeing companies had when you were working with CoinFirm. Was there anything that you're like, oh, I can duplicate this, it should be super easy? Was there anything you're like, oh, I didn't think about this, or a challenge or something that happened where you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to switch the way we do things here because it's not gonna be the same as the last time?
I think much more focus on sales and getting early clients. That's something that we right now, our approach is to have certain amount of wins, but then work on the big clients who we can learn a lot from and work with them in the way that we almost like we are software developers for them. So we solve the problem and we learn in the process. I think the product market fit takes longer than you would expect, or it's actually set on the market, especially when you do something easy, right? I don't know, consumer app or anything like this. I know that it doesn't have to be easy, right? But it's easier than trying to solve critical problem for, sophisticated company, right? You cannot like do MVP on this too much, right? You need to create a product which works and does things which are critical, especially in compliance, right? You cannot have like, oh, it's more or less correct, right? You cannot do this, right? So the product market fit time is longer than you would expect. So I don't buy into this like, oh, make this website and see how many people would come for what, right? If you don't have anything to even understand that you are in compliance, you know how it is. Not many people understand compliance. Like, they may think that they understand compliance, right? But at the end, 99% of tech people wouldn't understand compliance, right?
And so what is your product? Like, pitch us GateKnox. What is the product that you're offering? Who are the clients that maybe you're like, I can't believe they're not buying this right off the shelf. We should be selling out like pancakes or hotcakes to them. What's GateKnox providing? And who do you think is the ideal client that you're like, oh, they need this? They may not know they need this, but trust me, they need this.
Okay. So our main USP is how we deal with corporate onboarding, right? when you think about this, how you are right now, if you want to offer your payment product or crypto product into the institutional client, right, you need to build extensive onboarding mechanism, data sources, sanction step, negative news, individual client verification, data structuring, audit, verification panel, storage of this information. It's effectively, in my mind, if you want to offer your product to institutional client, if you want to do this properly, right, it's a minimum of $2 million, which you need to pay up front. This is the cost which you have to allocate from the onboarding, the interface to onboard, the data collection, verification, all the data sources, because if you onboard institutional client, you have 195 jurisdictions. US is actually 40 something jurisdictions. You have the registries for different jurisdictions, and then especially in crypto, you will have someone in, you have UK company, but the shareholder is from BVI, and the connections go around the world, and it's complex, right? So you either cut the corners thinking of, okay, like I just get some information so I can say that I've done, what I should be doing, or I need to spend 2 million as a starting point, and then I need to maintain it for another, million a year. And then I need to build a team who understand how to use it, right? Recruit them, all this stuff. So I think like this is how, we deliver end to end, including, and that's something, which we do as the next phase, including people who can help you to actually, if you have, I don't know, pigs, or if you have anyone. So that's gonna be, that's the engine. Onboarding someone, so make this as good user experience as possible through verification, compliance checks, patch negative news, and individual part of party directors or UBOs, all discovery happening. So that's what we are delivering right now. Next phase is also, when we, similar to to CoinFirm, right? What we are building is a database, right? I want this to be as streamlined in terms of data discovery for companies as possible, and very similar to blockchain analytics, right? If you think about blockchain analytics, right, it's like you have nodes, and then you have, connection between the nodes, right? And then if you think about corporates, it's also, the corporate is a node, right? And you have connection in the nodes with the nodes, right? So it's kind of similar way to do this analysis, right? You shouldn't, right now, when you do the corporate analysis, you have company, and then you go to the BVI where you have the shareholder, you go and check with them and this connection, and you build, and it takes weeks, months, that's something that is. The other way to think about this is like you will have this data already in the database, right? And you click, and you have all the connections already disclosed, right? All the connections already understood, and put this together in one report, risk report. This is how you can sell it. So that's massive market, right? You have the crypto market when we work with clients who are onboarding this because they do on-ramp for corporate clients. But we more and more work with the DeFi projects, which basically they don't want to do compliance, right? And this is what I was saying, that you can put the puzzle together, right? So we want to be one of the components, right? If they want to have DEX, which is compliant, and they don't want to take any counterparty risk, like they could simply tap on to our solution or to our network, right? And interact only with verified identities, right? The blockchain gives you beautiful, like, zero knowledge proof, selective disclosures, all this stuff. So you can actually, what we want to build over time is kind of the data containers for identities, right? And that's something many are doing. What we are doing differently is like we do this for corporate. Nobody's doing this for corporate. We want to do this also in the verified way. So we want to have the verification mechanism, right? And it could be people, it could be Python scripts, but it could be AI models which are verifying data, right? So there's a lot to do, right? I think over time, you effectively should have understanding of the risk before you engage. This is especially with corporate. I think with individuals, it's slightly tricky. Individual verification is more complex than corporate verification.
Interesting.
Individuals can fake IDs, all this stuff. Corporate, if they start faking, that's an interesting situation, right? So I think, and over time, you should be looking at, okay, these guys exist in this data container, this identity for like a year, right? They were verified, on the ongoing base, couple of months. So it's easy for me to engage, and the risk is much lower, right? And if I don't want to have problems, and that's something, which is critical as well, it's like, I just engage with the low risk or medium risk, right? Because
Right.
the Pareto principle is working very well in compliance. 20% of the customers which are creating, or 10% which are creating the biggest problem, would be consuming 90% of your resources, right? So if you think about it in this way, why are you dealing with 10%, right, of the risky clients? Unless your profile is that you are comfortable with the risky clients, right? Or you put a lot of costs in, on this, and you're focusing on this risky clients. That's the way. And I think, this is the way we should be approaching this over time. Like you have the high school when you know that only good people are there, right?
Right.
Nobody is entering them. You basically, and it's self-sufficient, self-sustainable ecosystem, right?
Right.
And
And
everyone,
nobody, even using that example, no parent wants to send their kid there, same as no corporation wants to send their customers
Exactly.
money there.
Exactly.
But what was the existing landscape? We have a couple minutes. What was there before? Like, it seems like to me, if I'm building on a compliance program, I got to reach out to all these different service providers. I'm trying to balance. I'm spending more money trying to do research than anything else. And I still don't know what is going to be good for my specific situation. So they're coming to you and you're saying, we'll build everything out for you. On top of that, we also have a lot of data. So now you can interact with other corporations within our ecosystem and understand who you're dealing with at that point, which is something that these individual service providers can't provide you. They can't provide that. Whereas you're kind of building this ocean where all the boats that are coming into this ocean can kind of connect with each other if needed. But at least they know, hey, if I'm going to connect with that other boat, he's been vetted. Would that kind of be a good summary?
very good. Yes, exactly. And then, like we want to open up the gate for institutional clients. I don't understand why crypto is kind of just focusing constantly on this individual clients. I think we hinder the growth, right? Because like how many more individual clients you would have on an annual basis? 5%, 10%? Probably not even this. So we need to open up for institutional client, right? And it's like this couple, like 1inch, for example, is the only player who can kind of bring you liquidity, right? It shouldn't be difficult, right? It should be like, oh, I want to buy some crypto and then put this in the staking, all this stuff. It should be like bam, bam for institutional client to enter. Right now, it's crazy difficult, right? It's
The
almost
compliance. So
impossible.
the reason why they're not entering, then they can't use their customers' money with non-compliant entities.
Exactly. And also, like if someone wants to take them, right? It's almost like, how do I take them? I don't have resources. I need to build the workflow for this, like then you end up with Excel and all this stuff, which is crazy. I think it's just simply not sustainable. You're just creating yourself huge risk, right?
I love it. Paul, where can people find you? You posted about your health routine recently on LinkedIn. It seems like that's the best place for people to find you. Where can our audience get in touch with you? Because I think your solution is what a lot of organizations need, but they think they have to go to 15 different providers where they can just come to you and you can kind of set out the journey, and you're there with them for the whole journey, which I think it makes it more interesting versus just selling them a tool or solution that they can use for 1 or 2 years.
I think LinkedIn is the easiest. I know that X is exciting, but it's kind of, I'm trying to, like, social media are so consuming in terms of time and focus. So I'd rather stay on boring like hell LinkedIn.
What do you mean? I create funds now, Johnny.
You
I definitely
ready?
agree. Thank you so much. I love that you took us through the founder journey, and I love that you're building something else. Which, at first I was like, oh, GateKnox just seems like, like they'll do your AML and compliance. But what you're building there sounds like you're building another coin firm, to be quite honest. So I'm glad that you're getting into a healthy state to continue on that journey. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Stephen.